One Piece is amazing, like seriously, and I mean you guys know that, duh, that's why you're here, but no, seriously, One Piece is next level, especially off the chapter that we just got, and currently One Piece is in shambles. Like the community is in shambles. Just, oh my god. Okay, there's a lot to talk about and there's a lot going on, but typically for these videos, we drill down on specific things and kind of highlight it because, you know, for the reviews, we get in depth, but we don't want to stay on something for too long. So this is what these videos are for. And in this video, we're going to talk about Zoro, Sanji, Vegapunk, and Enel. Right? So those are the characters we're going to focus on because I made a very interesting discovery and Oda was telling us about these things all along. We just never noticed it, right? But if you're here for the first time, you enjoy One Piece, subscribe to the channel. We do this damn near every day. Drop a like as well and turn on post notifications so you never miss another video. And without further ado, let's break down some of the things I've come across because I think it's really important to understand where we're going and where we came from, right? So I guess first we can start with Sanji because I feel like just out of everything that's happened this chapter, obviously Momonosuke happened, Zoro happened, Jack and Inuyarashi, Nakamushi and Perospero, King, Mary Joa, Whitebeard, Marco, so many things happened, but literally in the comment section, the most I'm seeing is people referencing Sanji and what they think is happening, currently happening to Sanji. So what was stated is that Sanji, ever since the second time using this suit, his body has been feeling a bit off. I had mentioned that this could just be Sanji experiencing fatigue from using it, you know, a bit too many times, maybe in succession, or the way more interesting option is that Sanji, his body is starting to awaken from using the raid suit and is starting to activate the dormant genes that we thought he always had. Sanji's powers we've always questioned, right? Because we weren't sure exactly what was going on. A lot of people thought it was hockey, soul related, but as the Germa things got revealed, things started to make sense even though Oda explained it away as Sanji's passion, right? It wasn't necessarily Sanji being an experiment because based on what the story is telling us, Sanji is a regular human. Even his eyebrows are faced a different way because the experiment did not work with him. I mean, the entire point of Sanji's backstory is that he had to retain his emotions. His mom wanted him to keep his emotions. So I know people have been critical of Oda possibly giving Sanji this exoskeleton that his siblings have, but I think we have to look at it from the perspective of, does this compromise any of the values that Sanji has? Does this change anything in the story of Sanji does retain his emotions and Sanji does develop this superpower and this super exoskeleton that his brothers and his sister have? I came across something that mentioned something about Sanji which I found really interesting, where it's about Sanji's opponents and how they're always similar to him in certain ways. They talk about Kurobi and Sanji. They're two characters who use a specific martial arts style. Wanze and Sanji, both chefs who took great care of their knives. Jabra and Sanji were both regarded as the third strongest member of their crews. Absalom and Sanji, they're both perverts who would want to peep in a woman's bath. And then now Sanji versus Queen, you can say they're both connected to Judge in some way, and that leads to the conversation about Sanji's exoskeleton and the lineage factor. People did speculate that Sanji could have fought King because they both had somewhat hidden identities, and now with that connection, it can make a lot of sense depending on how Oda does with this fight. Could it be a legitimate tag team battle? We find out King is a Lunarian, right? And then Queen somewhat hints that Lunarians, they can just combust and just burst into flames like what Sanji does with his leg. When we go back to the lineage factor, what exactly is it? Because I think this chapter not only ties into it that way, but also with Momonosuke and the quote-unquote failed devil fruit, the smile fruit that Vegapunk stated it to be. More than likely, Vegapunk was lying so that the world government would not come in contact or have this type of power, because there's no way that's a failure. He can transform, he has the flame clouds. What is the difference between him and Kaido at this point? Could it be the scales and he's not as tough as Kaido? We have to wait and see. But the lineage factor is the blueprint of life itself, right? It's present in all living organisms, and the person who discovered it was Dr. Vegapunk with a research team led by Judge, and of course Queen is there as well. So Vegapunk is a master at manipulating this lineage factor. It's stated that by manipulating this from a young age, the growth of a life form can be changed, and that's literally what a devil fruit does. It affects one's lineage factor and it allows you to gain a supernatural power. That's what Vegapunk did with Kaido's lineage factor. He extracted it from Kaido and he was able to replicate it into a devil fruit, and we see what Momonosuke is now. That is scary, just how advanced Vegapunk is. But we cannot gloss over that, because Vegapunk, based on everything that's being done, it seems like he's 500 years more advanced than anyone else currently. But before we talk about that, why is Sanji's exoskeleton such a big deal, and why do people think it's not a thing? Well, in the story, Judge forced his wife, Sora, to undergo an experiment to manipulate the lineage factor of the 4 fetuses that she was carrying: Ichiji, Niji, Sanji, and Yanji. In the midst of the surgery, Sanji's mom took pills to try to halt Judge's ambitions, something that could manipulate the bloodline elements. But Sanji was the only one that was different. He grew up as a regular human being. However, now he has special powers. He can manipulate and combust his leg, his entire body at this point, because we have Hell's memories, and that's very unique. I love the fact that Queen called that out in this chapter because it is very unique. Now that leads us to Vegapunk. So is it far-fetched that the lineage factor of a Lunarian was used on Sanji? And again, the structural makeup of the Lunarians, we have no idea, so it definitely could be delayed. And what would be amazing is that Judge wanted these soldiers that had no emotions because he felt like those were the best soldiers. At the end in Whole Cake Island, he realized he made a mistake. He was even crying. And then Sanji, who was deemed the failure, now is the greatest and strongest soldier who retained his emotions and gained that power. I think that would be even more satisfying and somewhat exposing Judge's ideologies even more. It's not something to scoff at. But back to Vegapunk and something I came across, a very interesting scenario, because again, Vegapunk and his advancement seem to be 500 years advanced past anyone. Then that took me to chapter 433. First off, in chapter 433, we have Nico, Robin, and Sanji talking about Luffy and Dragon, but they mentioned Luffy's family being out of the ordinary. So basically how strong and strange Luffy is, it's hereditary at this point. Kobe then goes on to tell Luffy about Sea Stone, Kairoseki, and ships, and the man who is behind the technology, Dr. Vegapunk. He even mentions the devil fruit that Luffy ate, the conditions of the ability, he can explain it. And he also talked about new technology to feed devil fruit to inanimate objects. So that's not weird, right? He's talking about Vegapunk, talking about the new world, basically breaking all these things down for Luffy. But where it gets strange is that you're talking about all these things with Vegapunk, right? We know about the devil fruits and how they can be manipulated. Vegapunk seems to be very advanced. What do you think the cover story is? It is literally Enel and his exploration to Fairyverse. In the Fairyverse exploration, Enel went back to the moon, and there's where we pretty much learned that the Birkins, Skypians, and even the Shandorians, they're actually from the moon. So now when you look at this chapter, all the explanations the Vegapunk mentioned, the slight hint towards the lineage factor, it's like Oda was basically connecting all of these things, and at some point, Enel will be connected to all of this. But then I'm starting to think about Vegapunk, the automata, the artificial robotic life forms. When you go through that cover story, there are individuals where I'm like, any of these people look like they could be a Vegapunk, right? Because I don't think Vegapunk is from this world. He is too advanced in everything he creates. And would it be crazy that the lineage factor that they used was from one of the ancient species that Vegapunk could be connected to? This is more than coincidence, guys. I think Oda is subtly telling us something, but I wonder how Enel ties into all of this. It is really intriguing. It's also really interesting that people are now using chapter 813 where Sanji had a cigarette within Capone. Then all of a sudden it seemed like Sanji may have manipulated a cigarette to just combust out of nowhere. People are saying these are hints that Sanji could definitely have Lunarian genes. We could talk about even more stuff, but now I want to talk about Zoro. And what I'm going to focus on right now is SBS volume 96, just to give you guys some information about things Oda has referenced in the past and how it ties into what's going on today. So, in SBS volume 96, Oda was asked a question. It says several characters have appeared with the name Shimotsuki, including Shimotsuki Yasui, Shimotsuki Ryuma, Shimotsuki Kozaburo, and Shimotsuki Ushimaru. But is there a connection with the place Zoro grew up that bears that exact name, Shimotsuki Village, and Zoro's teacher, Koshiro? So given how Zoro said he was taught the term Tsunachi by a geezer in his village, and how in volume 92's SBS you revealed how some come to the East Blue, it's starting to make sense. Oda says, yes, you might have to follow very closely to picture this, but let me explain. It all starts with Shimotsuki Kozaburo, swordsmith and swordsman. So guys, Kozaburo, he's the man that crafted Wado Ichimonji and Enma. That's who Shimotsuki Kozaburo is. So Oda even going in depth with something like this of great importance via the SBS shows just how imperative it is and how impactful it will be for this story. So we'll continue. He says he forges Enma and bestows it to the heir of the Kozuki family, Oden. 2. 55 years ago, he sets out to sea. 3. He and the samurai of Wano have a grand adventure. 4. They make landfall in a certain place in the East Blue. 5. They save the locals from mountain bandits. 6. They teach the villagers the way of the sword, who became enamored with swordplay. Snatch, all that came from them. 7. They decide to settle there, founding Shimotsuki Village. 8. His son Koshiro is born 9, his granddaughter, Kuina, is born. To put it in other words, who Zoro meant by a geezer in his village, that he meant was actually Grandpa Shimotsuki Kozaburo-san himself, who comes from Wano country. Oh, then that could mean Zoro's lineage? Well, the story of Shimotsuke Kozaburo, the samurai who founded Shimotsuki Village, is all I'm willing to share today. Guys, with One Piece chapter 1023, everything is starting to make sense. Zoro's connection to the Shimotsuki, where it felt like he was drawn to them, or Zoro could have always been around them, right? They mentioned the samurai of Wano having a grand adventure. It seems like they were going around having a good time. A kid popping up out of nowhere that could be a Shimotsuki, not surprising if they were going around having a good time. But this is an amazing hint about Zoro's lineage and him being a Shimotsuki. I mean, I think it's all but set in stone at this point. He looks just like Ryuma. He looks just like Ushimaru. Oda's been saving Ushimaru for some weird reason, so we have to wait and see. But guys, obviously Luffy is special. But I think we're starting to see just how special Sanji and Zoro are as well, which isn't a bad thing. But still, we need a bit more information. I think the key to everything, though, is actually Vegapunk, so I predict by the end of Wano he does come there and explain some things. But right now, all we can do is speculate and have fun. In chapter 433, man, like that cover story, all the information mentioned, Vegapunk, like what is Oda doing here? It's also really funny that Zoro versus Ryuma, that happened while the Enel cover story was going on, and literally that chapter is called The Conclusion, and Enel is discovering this ancient city. Guys, the Automata being as advanced as they are, the Vegapunk stuff, Oda, what are you doing to us? So guys, give me your thoughts. How do you feel about all this? Expect an amazing video tomorrow. It should be a great time. But guys, give me your thoughts. Make sure to like the video if you did. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Follow me on Twitter at BragoDAce. Follow me on Instagram at BragoD.ace. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys all so much. Guys, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
I start doubting me, I felt lost. I rewrite it.